Namaste and good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me properly? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we will get started. I think Dr. Srishila Kamath said that she is not able to hear audio. I hope that is resolved at her end. Okay, we will get started. We have last week we looked at chapter 12, and in chapter 12 we talked about bhakti, or in other words, you can call it as inspiration for the joys of the inner self. That inspiration for the joys of the inner self results in a set of personal characteristics which we looked at as a kind of inspiration quadruplex, where the 32 characteristics listed as the innate behavioral characteristics of such bhaktas, the people who have that faith and devotion to the self and is geared towards acting only for the joys of the self, that is in identification with selflessness. Those characteristics of were described, and I'm sure that when we actually start trying to inculcate each one of them into our personal behavioral characteristic, we will also be raising ourselves to the state of that self. So hopefully all of us will be trying to reach to that state. Now, with that, the second phase of the Bhagavad-Gita, which is talking about the Bhakti Pada, came to an end. So we have Karma Pada from 1 to 6, and from 7 to 12, we looked at the Bhakti Pada, and that has got over. Now, the final phase, which is the Jnana Pada, or the knowledge, the path of knowledge, is basically starting from chapter 13. So from chapter 13, now we are going to look at a little more in detail about the knowledge of the self that Krishna has already started giving from the perspective of action, karma, and from the perspective of devotion, bhakti. Now we are going to look at further details which Arjuna himself initiated through questioning Krishna. So 13th chapter onwards is basically that Jnana Yoga, which is, doesn't mean that only from 13th to 18th we have Jnana Yoga. In fact, Jnanam, the knowledge of the self, is spread across all 18 chapters from different perspectives. Now we are going for knowledge, for the knowledge's sake, in terms of its details. That is what 13th to 18th is focused on. So the core concept of Bhagavad-Gita is to teach us the Upanishad's principle of Tat Tvamasi, that you are that. Our identity with the self is basically what Bhagavad-Gita is teaching us. That identity of us, Tvam, with that, Tat, is basically what Bhagavad-Gita is about. And this Upanishad Tattva, as part of enunciating this Upanishad Tattva, chapters 1 to 6, which is the Karma Pada, is also called as Tvam Pada. Tat Tvam Asi, that middle portion. Tvam Pada. It is talking about you. All of us. How to function in this world. Our motivations, attitudes, aptitudes, and how do we handle likes and dislikes, and how do you get into a state of flow. That is basically addressed in the first 6 chapters about us. It is talking about us and how we need to modify ourselves or to change our attitudes and motivations. And then the next 6 chapters, which ended last week, 7 to 12, was the Tat Pada, that we are talking about that infinite self. Nature of that infinite self as the universal, the imperishable, the infinite, through the first 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9. And then, of course, the manifestations, examples, Vibhuti, and then the holistic perspective that accrues because of that, the Vishwarupa Darshana, and finally, devotion to the self, which is about your total identification with that. How do you actually become that? For that, what are the characteristics required in you? So it is talking about that, the bhakti pada, or tat pada. So tat tvam is over. Now, what the next 6 chapters are going to address is this equality of tvam, tat and tvam. Asi padam, equal to padam, or jnana padam, which is called as the asi padam. Asi is that equality. So tat tvam asi, that and you are the same. That will be established by 13th to 18th chapters. So that is how the Bhagavad-Gita is structured. So 13th chapter, and in the beginning, Arjuna raised some questions. So he asked Krishna that he wishes to understand the nature of the self and the expressive power of the self. He wants to differentiate between what is self and what is not self. What is self and what is that which is not the self. The field and the knower. It is called as the field and the knower. The not self is the field, and the knower is the actual self expressing in this world. And what is knowledge and what is to be, what do you mean by knowledge? The highest level of knowledge, what is it? And what is to be really known? What is it that you should know? So these are the questions that Arjuna asked Krishna. The knower and the known. Kshetrajna and Kshetra. Knower is the Kshetrajna, known is the Kshetra. The knowledge, jnana, and the truth to be known, jnaya. As also the relationship between of the self and the self's creative power. What is the relationship between self and the self's manifested powers or creative power? Purusha and Prakriti. In other words, it is called as Purusha and Prakriti. So knower, Kshetrajna, known, Kshetra, knowledge, jnana, to be known, jnaya, the truth to be known is jnaya, self is the Purusha, and the creative power is the Prakriti. So that is basically how the 13th chapter and the whole Asipada starts. So we are also trying to now look into that in detail. Krishna is going to describe this in detail. It is going to be a very cryptic description in 13th chapter, which I will try to elaborate a little bit, so that in relation to some other philosophical implications that we have seen, or you may have seen as part of Sanatana Dharma. Kshetra defines Kshetra. Krishna defines Kshetra in the beginning as a one sloga. This body, which is the basis for all our experiences, the physical body, which is the basis for all our external experiences, pleasure, pain, sorrow, etc. That is the field. This body is the field. He who considers it as me and mine, and then I say it is me, my pain, my sorrow, my happiness, my pleasure, I attribute, I say, each one of us say my pain, my pleasure, my object, this is my possession, etc. So whoever it is inside me, which is talking through me as me and mine, is the knower of the field, is the one who actually experiences the field. So therefore, he is the knower, the Kshetrajna. So says those who differentiate between these two. That is how Krishna introduces the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. So the Kshetra is the body, and Kshetrajna is he who sitting inside says, it is me and it is mine. Okay, so that's a basic definition. The one who enables recognition as me and mine is the Kshetrajna. So he who knows it through knowledge that is reflected upon or imparted by others and be able to differentiate these as distinct from the self becomes the Kshetrajna. Therefore, if we are actually able to comprehend what this Kshetra, physical body, and the knower of the field, Kshetrajna, is, then he actually becomes the Kshetrajna. If we really understand the self as separate from the body, then we become Kshetrajna. In the sense, each one of us is the Kshetrajna and we realize it. if you are able to differentiate your BMI in simple terms, if you are able to differentiate your body, mind, and intellect as different from the self, you are a Kshatrajna. So Kshatrajna is each one of us is a Kshatrajna. When we actually realize that self as different from the not self, the body, mind, and the intellect. Okay. So that is the fundamental knowledge that we need to, fundamental actually concept that we need to capture. So, and that way that the self is then over in any field, in each one of us. Then as Kshetrajna, the self is actually giving us life. Each one of us, in each one of us, the Kshetrajna is sitting and is the knower of that field. The self sitting in, or self that is enlivening Anandji's BMI is now the Kshetrajna inside Anandji. Similarly, it is inside Rajita Devi and Bindu and Dr. Sushila and anyone, that is the Kshetrajna. And similarly, if you take fire, even in those objects, in the fire, as it cannot express itself, but as heat, it is resident inside and then expresses itself, as the Kshatrajna. So it is the dharma of everything. That is, the dharma is the Kshatrajna inside each one of us as the principle of life and living, sitting inside us and living in us. That power is called as Kshatrajna. So why, when, for example, the body perishes, okay, Sharira, how did the, and is different from the self, it is a perishable thing. Sharira, Siriam Anachat, that which perishes, that which perishes, that which perishes. In Sanskrit, it is called a Sharira. That is how the term Sharira came. Sanskrit terminology. Sharira is that which perishes. Definition of the word Sharira, that which perishes. So, Sharira, that which perishes, is the Kshetra, the field, upon which the self works. We protect it. We protect it, not only that, from within the immune system also protects it. Kshayatranat, it is Kshayatranat, it is a, that which protects. It undergoes wear and tear and perishes. Kshayat. And it is used to perform actions that yield results. Kshetravat. So all this actually put together means it is Kshetra. So Sanskrit term Kshetra implies a lot of things. That it has to be protected. It is, it is something that has to be protected. It is something that is perishable. It is something that has to be protected. And it undergoes wear and tear. And it is used to perform actions in this world. Kshetra. If without Kshetra, the self cannot do anything. Without Kshetra, the self cannot do anything. So without the body, mind, and intellect, the self is, it cannot do anything. So that is, so you have to now start getting a feel of what self is and what the Kshetra is. Kshetrajna and Kshetra. The self sitting inside us and works through our BMI and gives us some experiences, becomes the Kshetrajna, and also sees everything, witnesses everything. So it is Kshetrajna. And then the body through which it expresses, Sharira, that is the Kshetra. And this is basically what, even our Sanatana Dharma concepts of temple, etc., is built on that concept. Now we have the sanctum sanctorum, within which the self, the idol, is placed, and then the whole body. And that whole body is that temple persons, and this is called as Kshetra. Therefore, the temple is called as Kshetra. That is, that is the representation of this concept. Not only within for each of us individuals, but it is expressed in the way our temple is defined. The Kshetra, therefore, it is called as Kshetra. Temples are called as Kshetras. And it is also the distinction between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna have also been elucidated in very much detail in many of the Upanishads, sources in Vedas, as well as analytical expositions in Brahma Sutra by the wise scholars of Europe. I mean, so it has been handed over to us, these definitions, which is summarized here in the 13th chapter. In Chandogya Upanishad, Rishi Uddalaka is seen to be advising Swetaketu about the characteristics. So he says, Saumya, before this world was manifest, before this whole universe came about, there was only existence. That is in 6-2, in the first verse in 6-2 mantra. Without this manifest, there was only existence before the whole universe came about. One without a second. That existence was one without a second. There was nothing else. It was only existence. That is how it is defined in the Vedas. On this subject, some maintain that before this world was manifest, there was only non-existence and one without a second. Out of that non-existence, existence emerged is basically what some people say. But in reality, there was only one entity, and that was called as existence. Sat. That was Sat, existence. That then in 687, again, he defines that which is the subtlest of all is the self. That when the universe came about, that which is the subtlest of all, which we cannot see, we cannot experience by itself, is called as the self. It is the truth, it is the self, and that are you, that you are. So Rishi Uddalaka is teaching Swetaketu, saying that subtle power which is everywhere is basically what is inside you also, and that is you. 687. And then Kaivalya Upanishad, it says that which is the supreme, which is the self in all, that highest and subtlest form which is there within each one of us is the self in all, the great Ayatanam. Vishwasyayatanam Mahat. Mahat, it is the supreme, and it is the support for everything, the great abode of the universe, which is subtler than the subtle, which is eternal. That you alone are. And that is what your identity is. That is what Kaivalya Upanishad says. And then in Mandukya Upanishad, it says, I am Atma Brahma. That is one of the Mahavakyas. I am Atma Brahma. This Atman, which is inside us, is the self, is Brahman. The self is infinite. That is Mandukya Upanishad. Then in Chandogya Upanishad, it says, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is Brahma. Brahman. Everything is included is Brahman, infinite. Everything comes from Brahman. Everything goes back to Brahman, and everything is sustained by Brahman. Brahman means you can replace that with infinite, then it makes sense. One should therefore quietly meditate on that infinite. Each person has a mind of his own. Every one of us have separate minds. What a person wills is his present life. He becomes, when he leaves this world, he disappears. One should have this in mind and meditate accordingly, is basically what the Chandogya Upanishad says. And it says that Tatra jayade leyade anidhi tat jala anidhi. Therefore it is born, thereinto it is merged, and thereby it is maintained. So it is everywhere, and out of that emerges these physical forms, and then it merges into that itself. This myself within the heart, this is Brahman. This is how the various Upanishads define the substratum, which is the self. Or in summary, that is the Paramarthika Swarupa, the real nature of the self. What is that? One without a second. There is no second, there is only one. And that is what every one of us are. You are that. That alone you are. This Atman is the Brahman. All this verily is infinite, the Brahman. And this myself within this is Brahman. So repeatedly it is talked about, and that is summarized in one at the beginning, so that we can all comprehend, we can all start thinking about the self and as the infinitude and which is everywhere. It is like, an analogy that is used very very commonly is this analogy of the sun getting reflected in different pots of water. If you keep different pots of water, and if you look at each one of those in sunshine, you can see the sun in each one of those pots. They are not different. It is the same sun being reflected. And the self is, the sun, and in each one of us it is reflected in our minds, in our mind, which is the pot's water. The mind is the water in the pot. There, the self is reflected. The image of the sun is reflected. Individual self. It is reflected as the individual self, but it is no different from that self. So that is the analogy that is commonly referred to. Now I am going to get into the details of this. And before I get into the slogas, I will explain that in a scientific sense. And for those of you who can appreciate it, just try to follow it. We have talked about it a little bit earlier also in terms of some of the Upanishad concepts. But again, to repeat that, and as well as to connect it with what is going to come from Krishna. So this I'm calling it as the Gita Intelligence plate, one of the plates of Gita Intelligence, which I will also be posting, so you can take a look at it and study it and understand. So basically, on the left-hand side, I will now try to touch it up as point it out. So the infinite became the universe, and that is, the substratum, ayatanam, the basis for everything, the self, and represented as the self inside each one of us, becomes physically manifested now as consciousness from within us. And that consciousness is nothing but a reflection of our existence, all the knowledge that we can acquire, and all the happinesses that it can give to the body, mind, intellect, the physical things. So existence, knowledge, and bliss is reflected within us. The Brahman, infinite Brahman, is reflected within us as the Prajna, the first state of consciousness, which is called as Prajna, which is not tied to any of our physical equipments. And then what happens is, the moment the Prajna enlivens our brain as consciousness within us, the root of consciousness within us, the root of our existence, the root of our knowledge, and the root of all the happiness that we can experience. Without this consciousness, you do not exist. You cannot acquire any knowledge, connect with any knowledge, or you cannot experience anything in this world. So that Prajna, the root, which is not contaminated by anything, suddenly, when the mind develops, the intellect comes and the ego takes over. Ego and the intellect takes over. And then it starts helping us to create ideas, to make decisions, and also to effect judgments. So ideas, decisions, and judgments starts coming out of that intellect. Therefore, and it takes ownership of it and then thinks that it is me. The intellect, the limited intellect, with that physical limitation, we think that is my identity. I say I exist, I know, and I am happy. These are the things that we keep saying. When we experience happiness from the physical world, we say I am happy. Or we learn something about the outer world, I say I know, etc. And always I keep saying, whenever I am alive, I keep saying I exist. Then the emotional mind is something which develops and connects it to all the kind of experiences that we have, emotions, feelings, doubts, indecisions, etc. The mind takes control, and it works through the senses and body, experiencing everything, and then also trying to do things, sensations, actions, and all kinds of even inactions, laziness and negative things, everything. So the prajna gets into the mental world of Taijasa first, and then into the physical world as actions, creating the world that we live in, Vishwa. So this is how the infinite self is getting translated into our ego, intellect, mind, and the senses, the powers of the senses and the body. And this is basically what the Upanishads talk about. In a scientific sense, it is about the Brahman, infinite, becoming the universe, and then the life forms inside it, the Atman, we the Jiva. Each one of us has Jiva. There is this initial singularity. There is only one thing, which is that infinite. And then the universe of matter and energy. And then, of course, it gets differentiated into sunlight, glucose, energy systems, and all those things, water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and all the stuff. And the life processes that take place within us, cells and tissues, and differential revelation of genetic genes, and the muscle systems, nervous tissues, etc. And we have the physical consciousness, ego, memory, intellect, mind, senses, and the organs. So you can see that how that Brahman, the infinite energy, is now getting limited through these physical systems within us as life, as Jiva, and working through our mind, body, mind, and intellect. The Ahankara, the Andakarana of ego, and the Andakarana of ego, memory, intellect, and mind, the Panchendriyas and Karmendriyas, helping us act in this outside world. So that is the translation, the transformation that happens. So this is basically what Krishna is now explaining through the verses, next verses, where he said at the beginning of the chapter, answering the question about Arjuna, the knower and the field, he defined, and then he says, we need to really understand all the differentiation that happened, and I'm going to now list it. And then he says in 6th verse and the 7th verse that to enumerate the nature of a kshetra, he is now enumerating that. What is it? So again, it is a cryptic list of the in 2 verses, which says the enumerate the nature of kshetra. It can be listed as follows. He says it is the great elements, subtle matter, or mahabhutas, ego, intellect, unmanifested mula prakriti, 10 senses of knowledge and action, the mind, the 5 objects of the senses, desire, hatred, pleasure, pain, the aggregate body, intelligence, courage, and fortitude. So 14 items initially was mentioned. But if you look at it, you will probably, you will just look at it as a list and then try to memorize it when you understand, and then you say that I have understood it. That is basically not what. If you really reflect on it, we will try to we will be able to understand how this has come about. So I'm going to explain that through this infographic. And in fact, in 2 infographic, the whole of this chapter is encapsulated, and I'm going to explain that. And then we will look at a little bit more detail in visualization, and I will post this for you to actually, read and reflect. So here it is. You can look at the screen. The infinite is everything. It is everything. You should not say that it is from nothing something happened. So it is everything infinite. The past, the present, the future, it cannot be, it is eternal. There is no birth, there is no death. It cannot, be experienced, nothing. It is the infinite. And when the universe, there was this bang and something happened, everything in this universe was undifferentiated. It was not separated initially. Initial moments of the universe, creation of the universe, undifferentiated. And that is in the Upanishads and the Vedas, it is described as avyakta or avyakrita, undifferentiated. It is not yet differentiated, avyakrita. That is called as the energy of the Lord, or Ishvara Shakti. In Vedas, described as Ishvara Shakti, the energy of the Lord. Initially, there was this explosion, as science says, the Big Bang. That is the Ishvara Chaitanyam Shakti, the energy of the Lord, which is avyakrita. Nothing is differentiated in that energy. There is no sun, the moon, the planets, nothing is there. It is pure, it is energy that is manifested. Ishvara Shakti, In Vedas, it is called as Ishvara Shakti. The Sanskrit term used to describe that is called as Avyakrita, unmanifested or undifferentiated, undifferentiated. It is just manifested, but it is undifferentiated. Then what happened is this Avyakrita, the undifferentiated, slowly started getting differentiated. That is Vyakrita. It became Vyakrita. And as the different forces of nature, and we as science, we also differentiated it as the 4 types of fundamental forces: electromagnetism, nuclear forces, weak and strong, and the gravitational forces, etc. So differentiated forces of nature. And this force, out of these forces of nature, in one particular matter particle that got again formed, earth, life started forming, and each of this life is called as a jiva. That's it. So from the undifferentiated came the differentiation into multiple things. And within these life forces, each one of these life forces, and we are focusing only on human beings, therefore we are actually, I'm going in that route directly. The intellect, which is the power of determination, or it is called as Ichha Shakti. It was described in the Vedas as Ichha Shakti or Buddhi. Actually, look at it in another way. The universal intelligence, you can call as universal intelligence, is the intrinsic tendency for things to self-organize and co-evolve. Self-organize and co-evolve. That is how the universe got formed. The particles, multiple energy systems and multiple particles, all these started getting into a form of a system called as this universe, Milky Way, solar systems, and all those things. And each of those particles had a tendency to self-organize, into orbits and positions, etc., and rotating and revolving, etc., and evolve and expand into even more complex, intricately interwoven and mutually compatible forms. That is how the system got into a kind of order, the universe, which we all know. We can see that. And it is all working in perfect, synchrony. So that is called intelligence, universal intelligence. There is a kind of intelligence that is playing upon all this energy and particles, such that the universe keeps a particular order and a rhythm. What is that which keeps them? It is called as universal. Just call it universal intelligence. And this universal intelligence that intelligence gets reflected within each one of us as our individual intelligence or innate intelligence for each one of us. What is that innate intelligence within us? We can see that. The function of innate intelligence is to adapt universal forces. That is, we are adapting these energy systems within us as, various processes to create energy within our body, ATP systems and glucose and carbon dioxide and all these being converted and all those things. There is a lot of things working within us in a kind of order, in a kind of intelligence for the use in the body, within each one of us body, so that all parts of the body will have a coordinated action for mutual benefit. That is how it works. The sensation for seeing, smelling, tasting, and all those things working together. Not only that, we have also got this, metabolic systems within us that help us to digest, that help us to breathe and convert oxygen into energy, and all those things. It happens within us. Why? It's so that it can keep the system together. We also have within us proprioception capabilities, not only the perception from outside, but from within us also. For example, if we get temperature, for example, we all feel temperature and say that I am feeling feverish, right? What is that? That is an inner feeling, inner system, temperature maintain, balance, homeostasis. So many things are happening. The blood. Within our blood, we have hemoglobin, we have various other things, everything, it has got some certain range, small ranges within which it has to lie, normal ranges. So there is the system that maintains. There is this intelligence that is helping us to actually keep our body, mind, and the intellect, the BMI, intact and functioning in a proper manner. Coordinated. It is all coordinated from within. That is the kind of innate intelligence that this universal intelligence is bringing about within each one of us. So the intellect works. Initially, it expresses as the intellect, this universal intelligence, as the intellect within. That intellect is the intelligence of the living being as innate intelligence. And then it starts working through various other systems in the mind called as first as ahankara, ego, consciousness. So this is how the infinite, the undifferentiated when the universe began, and then it became savyagrada to vyagrada, differentiated into life, and then started tapping this universal intelligence into itself as the innate intelligence. And of course, then ego also came up, ahankara, which is your identification with that physical thing, your thinking, which is working, which will work only through our mind, and that is basically what we are going to come through now. So this differentiation happened like this, and then okay, there is something here, 5 great elements. I will come to that, but before that, let us start from the bottom also. The physical world of Panchabhutas, the 5 great elements, earth, water, fire, air, and all those things, and then that actually working through our senses, Panchendriyas of sound, touch, taste, shape, and smell, and working through the Jnanendriyas, perception first, and as well as the Karmendriyas, senses of knowledge and action, which combines with the mind to create what is called as the inner world, the physical world from outside, of physical objects, of materiality, working through the mind to create the inner world. Okay, just for example, you have all experienced seeing an elephant, for example. Let's say an elephant you have seen. How through the physical world, seeing, sensing through the eye, and hearing and seeing, etc., you are actually seeing it, and then the picture of the elephant is very clear within your mind. Now, in each one of your places now sitting there, are you able to see a physical elephant outside? No, you are not. But still, because of your experiences, you can create the elephant within your mind, isn't it? And that elephant has got all the physical characteristics of the actual elephant that you have experienced. So similarly, anything in the outer world, you create by experiencing it, and then you create within yourself as the subtle physical world. That subtle matter, sukshma world, is the, within. So whatever is the outside physical, the Panchabhutas, you can create that inside your mind. First, actually for the experience, it is to be created within you, in the mind. And that is called the 5 great elements. The starting point is that creation. You have to experience it, or you have to actually, visualize it initially in your mind for you to start experiencing it. So the 5 great elements, subtle, matter, Mahabhutas, pervade all modifications of matter. This elephant that is inside you, now you are going to modify it. Whether that elephant is sane and healthy or not, you think that it is going to attack you. If you think like that, what happens is that within your mind, you create a rogue elephant. Irrespective of whether the actual elephant is a rogue or not, you create a rogue elephant. Okay, simple example only. Similarly, in all our world's life's transactions, we create a world within ourselves by mixing the ego with the mind's variations. Our experiences and your thoughts, not only the physical sensations, but your mind creating ideas and thinking about it, and then creating a world inside you. And that is the starting point for all your actions. So it need not be the right thing. It need not be the correct thing. It is what your world is. You create it. You start it. And that is the 5 great elements within you first. And then it is working through your mind, through your Panchendriya. So your perception, Panchabhutas, Jnanendriyas to the mind, and then mixing the ego, you create the subtle world of your experiences. And then through the mind and through Karmendriyas, you act in the outside world. This is how we are all working. So this is basically what Krishna is saying. What is that? The infinite is the self. And that self now became the undifferentiated, then became the differentiated, became the intellect and the ego within our mind. So all these things in blue here, after the infinite here, is basically what this infinite has become within our body. Within our BMI as the intellect, ego, and the subtle world. It energizes. Something that is energizing all these things like that. And that is what is giving you all the experiences in the outside world. So that power of the infinite, which was initially undifferentiated and then became the differentiated as intellect, the ego, and the subtle world of Panchabhutas, that is the Kshetrajna. The Kshetrajna, the power that creates the experiences within us, is the Kshetrajna. And that Kshetrajna needs to express itself. How? Through the BMI, through that mind, through the Karmendriyas, and through the senses and the organs of action, etc. It expresses. So that medium through which this power, translated power, the mediums through which the translated power expresses itself is the Kshetra. And the translated power is the Kshetrajna. And the infinite, which is beyond all this. That is how it is. So you can now imagine. Just think about this sit, meditate on this, and then you will see how that infinite is infiltrating your BMI as the Kshetrajna, and then working through the Kshetra. Kshetrajna working through the Kshetra. Kshetrajna working through the Kshetra. So what is this Kshetrajna? The Kshetrajna is that infinitude, which has no biases, but then it just gets mingled with this physical body, BMI, and then gets the color of all the things that is there in your mind. And it starts expressing. It gives you the experiences. First experience that the Kshetrajna gives. The first experience that the Kshetrajna gives is what is called as Ichha Shakti. That is what we are talking about in the 8th chapter as self-effort within us. The power of self-effort. Thus, undifferentiated as the infinite, as the undifferentiated, expressing through the prajna of each one of us as the intellect. The first thing that it makes, that it forms, is Ichha Shakti. And that Ichha Shakti is the power of Kshetrajna. And then it actually also identifies this physical frame as you, I. So ego, that is ego. So it starts expressing as ego. And not only that, it then infiltrates the mind, mingles with it, and starts giving you experiences. So within our mind is experiences. So that is the, infinite has already lost its identity as the infinite, and it has now started becoming the individual that we all are, and making us limited. But at the same time, it is giving you the experiences. And that power also has the capability to actually change your experiences from the limited to the unlimited. That is the thing that you need to understand. That power is powerful enough to actually give you the feeling of infinitude also, to give the belief of the infinitude also, to give you the actual identification with infinitude rather than with the limitations. It has got that. What is standing in the way is the ego and the various transformations of the mind, so that we don't see the truth. So this is something that happens naturally. But we also have endowed with the power, the intellect has the power to actually force out this and make the power of the self express through itself. Now, what is the practical significance of all this is something that all of us need to understand. Is that Whenever you feel let down, whenever you feel that you are not confident of doing something, whenever you feel that you are failing, whenever you feel that you are not up to it, whatever situations you are in a negative situation, negative frame of mind, that negative frame of mind is the mind's play on the infinite. So don't give way to that. Force yourself out. That is, milk the Icha Shakti, the power of the infinitude, and then force yourself to take the first step in the opposite direction. If you are feeling let down, take the first step towards rising up. If you are feeling not confident, take the first step towards beating not confidence. If you are actually feeling that feeling negative, then take the first step towards feeling positive. So that is something left to each one of us to decide what is to be done. If it depends on what kind of negativity you are in, then you have to take the first step to break free of that negativity. That means you are putting self-effort, Ichha Shakti, into it. That means you are milking the differentiated force of the undifferentiated infinitude. That is it. The Ichha Shakti, the self-effort that you want to put in, is the milked power of the infinite, which is expressed in this universe as undifferentiated and then as differentiated and into each one of us. So that path, you can think about this path. So this is basically so it is the kshetra. This becomes the kshetra actually. Intellect, ego, everything becomes the kshetra, and each one of them is actually empowered by the kshetrajna. And expressing through our kshetra again, all these elements are kshetras. Okay. So I hope this is reasonably clear for each one of you. And if it is not, at this point also you can raise your doubts and I can clarify it once more before we actually go ahead, because a little bit more things are to be explained here. And that is what Krishna is going to talk about after 7th verse. So is there anything that needs to be clarified here? I hope it is more or less clear about how this transformation occurs, what is Kshetrajna, and what are the Kshetras, elements of Kshetra. Okay. Going ahead. The same picture, I'm going to slightly expand it. Okay, but before that, first thing, just I wanted to visualize it also in terms of this. Whatever we see here, the five great elements, for example, an analogy, the Raju Sarpavada in Advaita Vedanta describes this. This within the actual truth is the rope. But we see a lot of things and the mind projects that. How? The projects the snake onto the rope. So the five great elements now, the rope becomes the snake. The actual thing is completely changed. So this is how the mind works, through the kshetra. Okay. Just to illustrate that point, this we had done previously also, but I'm just connecting it here. And this is how the mechanism works within us. Okay. Is that clear? Going ahead. One more illustration. You can see that, this is we think this is the I. I am this. I'm thinking I'm this. But actually what has happened is this I came about because I superimposed this onto this Kshetrajna. The power that got differentiated within me as I. In fact, this becomes, the whole thing now becomes me. Intellect, ego, elements, mind, everything becomes the I. What Bhagavad-Gita is now teaching is that you should not project this onto this I. It is this I that we are actually is basically what we should keep within ourselves. You should keep these two things together, different. The infinite is me. But when it is working as Kshetrajna within me, I am imposing all this into it. And therefore, I am erroneously thinking I am this. Just like the snake, the rope became the snake. Just like the snake, the rope became the snake. Like this, how the snake became overimposed on the rope, and the rope became the snake. Like that, the I is getting imposed onto the Kshetrajna, and I erroneously think I am the limited BMI. So I call it as a small I. That's what happens. Okay, now. Okay, so this is how it works. In the world of knowledge and action, we have the jnanendriyas of hearing, sensing, tasting, seeing, and smelling. And all the material objects through Panchabhutas, now with the senses, and then makes us work through the organs of action, speaking, holding, moving, procreating, and excreting, karmendriyas. So that's how it works. And when we perceive things from the outer world, through the jnanendriyas and work through the karmendriyas, it is not a direct, only a translation here. The mind is playing a trick there, is creating a world here with ego, connecting with the ego, and then transferring it back to your actions to change the way you think and do actions. Moving becomes limited experiences local, divided. You have limited experiences, local, divided, and creations and destructions, and all this happens through our actions. Now, the mind controls all this perception mechanism through thoughts and purpose. Our thinking, and there is also a purpose, which is what motivations and inspirations, etc., play a role in. Our thinking is actually shaped by our purpose, sense of purpose, which is created by our motivations. And selfish motivations, selfless motivations. We have seen that previously. Selfless motivations are powered by the joys of the self. And when it is powered by the joys of the self, means Kshetrajna is controlling. Powered by selfishness means your BMI is controlling. That is what is happening. So they actually work through what mechanisms called desire, hatred, pleasure, and pain. These are the fundamental way the mind controls your work. Desires, hatred, pleasure, pain, and its opposites. So, in fact, Sankhya philosophy talks about the various 24 elements. These 24 elements are listed here: the undifferentiated, the buddhi, ahangaram, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the mahabhutas, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the jnanendriyas, then 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, the karmendriyas, and then 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, the panchabhutas. 24 elements of Sankhya philosophy is picturized here. All 24. Okay, we have not discussed the Sankhya philosophy. Don't worry about it. That is passingly mentioned here in the 13th chapter as start of knowledge, and I have picturized it. You can look at it, you can read up, and then try to correlate it and understand what this is all about. So it is the same thing, Sankhya philosophy. Now, okay, so we say that we control everything in this world, create our world through these things ultimately of the mind: desire, hatred, pleasure, pain. So what is desire? What is hatred? What is pleasure? What is pain? They are all created within us. So they are all part of Kshetra. They are Kshetra, not Kshetrajna. It is Kshetra. These are all Kshetra through which it works. It keeps changing. It can be changed. It can be controlled. It can be killed, etc. All those things. So, and if through these controlling this manifestations of the mind's capabilities is how you actually start understanding the Kshetrajna. If you really want to understand the Kshetrajna, in each one of us, we have to control this desire, hatred, pleasure, and pain. That is what Krishna says. And therefore, he lists out from 8th verse to 12th verse, 5 verses, he says, glories of the self that helps know Kshetrajna. How can you actually control your mind and have the vibhutis of the mind help you to understand the Kshetrajna. And that vibhutis are mentioned here now, of humility, modesty, innocence, patience, uprightness, and it goes on. There is a big list from 8 to 12, 5 verses. You can refer that in the Gita, in this chapter, 13th chapter, and they are listed as the glories of the self. Constancy in self-knowledge, realization of the end of knowledge as the knowledge of the self, and understanding the joys of the self as the paramount thing is the most important knowledge that we need to have. And the practical implications of realizing the joys of the self as in your actions was described in Karmapada as karmanyevadhikaraste mahabaleshu kadajanaha, that the law of work. From there, we have been describing how we can practically bring this about. So you are controlling your mind and making it selfless, powered by the joys of the self, is the way through which you can actually get over the ignorance of the self and identify with the Kshetrajna and understand that Kshetrajna as the infinite. So that qualities are described here. These qualities, if you look at these qualities here, if you project these, take these qualities upon and then project it to 12th chapter, you will understand the 32 characteristics that you need to develop as a bhakta, which was described in the last chapter. 32 characteristics. Those 32 characteristics will actually be part of your character only when your mind starts working with these qualities, these glories. And if you have these glories with you, then you will really understand Kshetrajna. You will become a Kshetrajna. That is it. You will become a Kshetrajna. That is Krishna telling Arjuna through the 32 characteristics of 12th chapter that ye omal ye mal bhaktaha. He says he is a devotee, means he is identified with me and he is me. He becomes a Kshetrajna. So that is how it has to be. You have to identify this with these qualities, to develop these qualities so that you will know Kshetrajna. And then after this, he is now going to, Krishna is describing the Kshetrajna and Kshetra as cause-effect relationships. Okay. Again, looking at the same diagram, but slightly modified to add it with added things. For example, let us look at this. The infinite, I put a line here, and beyond which is the infinite, beginningless Brahman, the infinite. That infinite now became first the Anvyagrada and then became the Vyagrada of effects. Okay, that is how the transformation happened. So, for the Avyagrada, what was the reason for this Avyagrada to come about? It was infinite. The infinitude. Brahman was the cause for the undifferentiated. And the undifferentiated became the cause for the differentiated. The effects became the final effects. So that transformation, I will explain it through another simple slide also after this, but the transformation is happening like that. From the infinite, the undifferentiated. And then it becomes the intellect, the ego, and then working through the subtle mind, and then expressing through the karma yogas, the karmendriyas to become actions in this world, creating the world, the effect, the world, the effect. The ultimate cause of it is infinite. If you look at it that way, effect, cause, like that it goes. So now, Krishna talks about a little bit in detail also here. He says that this infinite became initially undifferentiated, means it became abstract energies that are not undifferentiated, avyakta, and then they started differentiating. Forces are, became the universal forces, differentiated forces of nature. These forces are the root cause, the forces devoid of the qualities of the senses. These senses work because of the universal forces. Okay, but these devoid of the senses, the universal forces still exist. Devoid of the qualities of the senses and organs, yet they become, the forces become the experiencer. The forces become the experiences. These forces, how that is translated, we will not work into those scientific details, but I will just, one example I will just talk about in brief, which is the forces of nature itself is basically what works through our, the optical nerves. and then converts that into optical signals and then gives us the perception of light inside us. So that force, the perception of light, is a transformed, what you call, forces of nature. The forces of nature, without the eyes also, that forces which actually created light sensation in my eyes is existing. Can you all appreciate that? Without my eyes also, light energy and the forces that create light energy, etc., is already there. And through the device of the eye, it translates that into nerve impulses and then optical, what you call, sensations. So the forces are devoid of the qualities of the senses and organs, and yet is the experiencer. It is universal, it is pervasive, it is undivided, and it is support basis. Just as a simple example, take the case of the light. Take the case of light as the light energy, as the source through which our eye actually works to create the visual experiences within each one of us. So, devoid of all the eyes that we have, all the people here, that light energy still exists. When through different eyes it works, it gives different people the different visual sensations. So it has become cut into different pieces now. That universal energy has now become cut into individual energies. That is how this split of Kshetrajna takes place. So this is explained in 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th verses. This abstract avyakta became forces of nature which is undivided, and then it becomes divided into in our different sense organs: hearing, seeing, tasting, seeing, and smelling. Like the light energy, we also have the sound energy. We also have the smelling as a capability to smell, translated as within our tongue, and then related physical body equipments to translate it into taste, etc., etc., etc. So the infinite became the avyakt in undifferentiated, and then it started becoming the differentiated powers within our senses. The Kshetrajna becoming differentiated through the powers of the senses. So the Kshetrajna, which is universal forces initially, when it works through the eye, it becomes visual sensation. When it works through the ear, it becomes sound sensations. When it works through the nose, it becomes smell sensations. Through the tongue, taste sensations. When it feels the skin, the touch sensation. So it is all the same powers being converted into different sensual powers through the very different senses, because the senses are made for such functions only, and therefore they get translated. That is how it is happening. The cause-effect relationship is thus established here. And on the functional level, it is the self, the infinite as the self, which is the cause to create the effect of the experiencer of pleasure, pain, sorrows, etc. The effect is the pleasure, pain, sorrows, etc. So the cause is the self. It happens. So this is basically how this transformation happens. Now, to simplify this and also to explain it as a logical sequence, which you may not immediately comprehend, but you can again take a look at it when I post it. It is like this. The process of cause-effect relationship is also explained. In the next few 3 or 4 verses, this is explained. Okay, first look at the outside. Now we'll come down to the lowest level, our world. So modifications of the objects of the senses. I mean, as I said, the elephant became a rogue elephant. Our object, visually we saw the elephant, and then it is modified by the mind as a rogue elephant. Whether it is a rogue elephant or not, we don't know, but still, similarly, somebody is talking something bad about me. I take it wrongly and then start saying that he is trying to humiliate me, whatever. These things happen. I modify the modification. This modification of the objects of the senses is the field of where is this modification happening? Where is this modification happening? It is in the mind, isn't it? The mind is the field. The cause. Therefore, cause. What is the cause? Which is happening in the mind because of the purpose, thoughts and purpose of the mind. Isn't it? Our motivations. The way our experiences and our motivations and our purpose. That define the way we actually change the physical object within my mind. Think about that. So, what this chapter says is that the effect, which is the modification of the objects of the senses, happen because of thoughts and purposes of the mind. Therefore, the cause is the thought and purpose of the mind for this effect. Now, now take this as the cause, the effect, the thoughts and purpose of the mind. Nature of the thoughts and purpose of the mind happens why? Because of my ego, my own particular way I look at it, my ego, my identification with it, field of the ego. So cause is the ego or the ownership that I assign to my things. So ego becomes the cause for the effect of the nature of thoughts. And if this becomes the cause which is making the effect of modifications in the object. Okay, so step by step. So now we have reached the ego state. And if you consider ego as the effect, this ego is the effect of what? By my judgment and my thinking, intellect, my differentiation, the intellect. And that intellect is because intellect in the sense of even the universal intelligence, which actually tries to put together or pull apart. Universal intelligence. And that universal intelligence, if it is the effect, that is caused by the differentiated forces of nature. And the differentiated forces of nature is caused by the undifferentiated energy, and that undifferentiated energy came from the infinite self. So just imagine everything is the self, infinite. Infinite is getting transformed into transformed into the modifications of the objects and the senses. This is how the whole thing works. That is the reason why we say that I am the infinite, but working through my BMI and creating my world. Okay, so the self is the real Kshetrajna, and it works through the next phase. It becomes a universal intelligence expressing through within my mind and giving me the experiences. The experiencer is the Kshetrajna. And how does this experience work? Because it works through the Kshetra. All the rest of it is Kshetra. Everything from ego, intellect, ego onwards, everything is the Kshetra. Okay, so I hope that is clear. This is basically what is explained here. And now, and as in a practical sense, I'm just defining this as to understand this. Your inner nature is the cause for everything. Your inner nature is the cause, the mind and its fluctuations. Your circumstances and the environment is the effect. The world that you create, circumstances is the effect. So each one of us, we can think, does our circumstances reflect my inner nature? Think about it. Does the circumstances that I am in currently, does it reflect my inner nature? Think about it. The cause of the effect is called as Prakriti, and the cause of the experience is called as Purusha. The effect is created because of the nature, which is my Prakriti. It is termed as Prakriti. And okay, I might experience happiness, I might experience success, I might experience sorrow, I might experience hatred. All those things happen, experiences. These experiences happen because of the nature, the cause, the nature which is the cause, and creating these effects. But what is the actual reason why this experience happened? This experience happened because of the Kshetrajna, the Purusha inside us, isn't it? If the life is not there, will you experience anything? Nothing. So the energy which is within me, making me experience, is the Kshetrajna, which is also called as the Purusha. Does your circumstances reflect your nature? Okay, now in a practical this thing, let us analyze this. Are you predominantly confident or prevaricating? Think about it. Are you a confident personality or are you a prevaricating personality? I mean, they keep changing, shifting. Now, likes and dislikes, hope and despair. What emotions do you experience? Angry, frustrated, depressed or moody, energetic or raring to go, or optimistic or abundant? Think about this. Think about this. Your nature. Will angry reactions yield optimal results? Think about that. So, tapping the Kshetrajna. For that, you have to think. If when you get angry, think whether this angry reaction will yield optimal results for you. Will being frustrated help you change the situation? If you are frustrated, think whether this frustration will help you. Can my mood swings really help you? How can you control your mood swings? How will your energy and drive help you to change your destiny? How do positivity and growth mindset help you? So this is how you actually start tapping the power of the self to become more and more successful in life. Analyze and reflect on the kind of world that you create around yourself. How can this knowledge help you make changes? You know yourself, the self and the Kshetrajna, and you know the field, and all the fields are modifiable and modifications happen. And how can you change those modifications? Anger is a field of the mind, the effect of the mind, anger. So can you change the mind so that the anger is dissipated? Similarly, all those other qualities. This is for us to think about, analyze and reflect on the kind of global environment that you can create around yourself. That is intelligence, the universal intelligence reflecting through you. That means the self reflecting through you. How can this knowledge help you to make changes in the world so that you create a sustainable world of happiness, success, and long-lasting progress? How can you do that? Changing the Kshetra. Changing the Kshetra requires the Kshetrajna to be active. And the Kshetrajna, the true Kshetrajna, is the coexisting, expanding, compassionate, truthful, rightful, peaceful entity. And if you can infiltrate all those into the field, then success is yours. So that is the message that we need to get from this. Okay. So again, let us look at this. The infinite giving us existence or non-existence, and universal energies, life energies, awareness, mind functions, auditory senses perceptions, ear, sound waves, objects of sound. In one way, sound, if I'm looking at sound, objects of sound, sound waves, ear, auditory sense, mind, awareness of sound, the life energy is working within you, and universal energy is controlling you, meaning, you are working for the upliftment of the infinite. The transformation process is basically what it is, the unmanifest existence into physical, manifested physical, chemical, biological energies within each one of us as life and consciousness. We are each tapping this energy and becoming the intellectual, mental, physiological functions and thinking, the power of thought. And energizing my organs of senses and action and working through my karmendriyas, moving, sensing, etc. So I impose. And then what happens is therefore, this physical me imposes myself on the infinite. And I consider this to be me. Just like what our rope became the stake. Okay, so just look at this thing, how transformation happens. The infinite, the rope. It is an analogy. Infinite and the rope analogy. And with all this transformation process, I become the individual, imposing myself on the infinite, superimposing myself on the infinite. Just like the stake is imposed on the rope. This is basically the process that happens. Another illustration only. So nothing new, but the same thing. So this is basically what we all are. So you can see that everything, all this is the Kshetra. And the Kshetrajna, the infinite self, is working as the Kshetrajna, experiencer, giving me first level consciousness and then working through this Kshetra. So, what is it that is there in this knowledge for us? We must understand that the first and the foremost and the primordial and the eternal cause is the infinite, which is the basis for my knowledge, my ignorance and projection, sattva, rajas, tamo gunas. The self sitting in me as the driving energy derives from the universal energies, universal self, that comes from the infinite. The self enlivens the senses, the mind, the intellect, the ego, and help produce all the experiences in this world based on my interaction with the components of nature. The senses, mind, intellect, and the ego control nature. All individuals are powered by the same self. This is basically the knowledge that is again and again being thrust into our mind. So again, I will now let us visualize it once more. The life of hope and despair. Imagine this. Each one of us is like this. Imagine that. We are limited. I am the BMI. This is my thought. I forget that I am the infinite. I am the self. But I am BMI. That is how we all think. Actually, we have to get rid of that. We are the limitless. I am the self. BMI powering the BMI. Think about this. This is what you think you are. This is what you think you are, because you have far greater faith in your senses and intellect. That is our problem. We don't believe, we don't have faith in the Gita intelligence, but instead we have belief and faith in our BMI, senses. And therefore we think we are this. And we keep saying that, okay, all this is okay, but then it is difficult. But then it is difficult. No, I cannot do this. That thing, that thought comes over because I forget the Gita intelligence. I forget the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita. And then I go after the knowledge of my BMI. So this is what we think we are. But actually, Bhagavad-Gita is telling us, this is what you are. This is what you are. I am the self. Upanishad knowledge tells us that this is what you are and not this on the left. Don't limit yourself, but be like this. So again, look at it in this way. I am the infinite expanse of blue, infinite self. I am the infinite self. The blue color represents infinitude. Okay. And that is why we have actually given, in our stories, in our visualization of Sri Krishna, we have given him a blue color, dark color, or whatever. That is because it is infinitude. That is me, that self, that Krishna, that blue boy, that is infinitude. But what is happening is each one of us is like this because of our varying kinds of ego. Ego, thick ego, black lines, and then slowly getting dotted is basically those individuals whose egos are less, because their knowledge of the self is more confident. And ultimately on the right side, you have somebody who is totally confident on the powers of the self with very limited ego only, which is hardly visible. So these are all these different kinds of people. Different kinds of people afflicted by ego in this world, coming up in this world and going and dying, coming up in this world and dying. But nowhere, going nowhere, because the I, infinite, is there in everyone. It is only the BMI, physical things that comes up as bubble and then get lost in this infinite. It is infinite. Just imagine each one of us is like that. We are all in the infinite. We are going back into the infinitude. But while we are in there, we think about ourselves as the BMI, depending on the strength of our ego. Okay, so this is how it is. Each one of us, individual people. And they disappear. And when they disappear, what happens? We all leave behind our thoughts. This is what happens. On the left side, the egoistic person left behind so much of ego in this world. Whereas on the right side, somebody who had only the limited ego for surviving in this world, but was always selfless, did not leave behind anything. He became one with infinitude. The others left behind traces of ego. And then what happens is, depending on the kind of ego that we leave behind, thoughts that we leave behind, those egos actually get trapped in other bodies. Which will help that ego to express itself. Whereas the infinite self is always infinitude. Okay, so this is how our, karma bala, rebirth and reincarnation and things like that are actually described to illustrate this process of the way the mind works, the ego works, and the infinite self can be attained. Okay, just picturizing that for our benefit, I have put these pictures. In other way, look at it in another illustrative fashion. Kshetra, the physical kshetra, all physical bodies, no life, let us say. Suddenly, what happens is the self powers it, and we see the self. Actually, this is the physical body. It is only kshetra. But when the self comes, that is when we have the life, becomes the jiva. Imagine this. That is kshetra, enlivened by the self. So, okay, that is with Kshetra and Kshetranya. Now I just wanted to put this into a practical plane also for those who are interested. In a global context, in the physical world, we can apply this knowledge and, as a field of expression is the Kshetra. Field of expression is the Kshetra. And there is a core. Imagine all of us, people working in a particular space, a school and an organization or in a family. The field of expression is what? Depending on when. If you're working as a professor or a teacher, then you are at the school or the college. The university is the field of your expression. And that field of expression, in that organization, there is a core. Similarly, at home, there is a core. Similarly, in the organizations, enterprises that you work, there is a core for that organization. And that core is basically what we need to understand. Just like Kshetrajna and the Kshetra. We should know the Kshetra and we should know the Kshetrajna. So we should know the organization and we should also know the core principles of that organization. So it could be any field. And understand the core in the global context and the field of expression, we will be able to define sustainable business contexts. A business intent, a customer connection, and an employee experience can be defined if we really understand the organization that you are working and the core of that organization. If you are building an enterprise by yourself as an entrepreneur, then you should know the core of what your ideation and entrepreneurship is all about, and the organization, the core, the field of the expression of that idea is your organization, and you should understand that both of them as different and distinguished, and then you will be able to define sustainable business context of a right intent, right connection with the customers and the users, and the right employee experience. The field of expression, employees are the field through which you express yourself. So with that context, there is another Gita plate that we have developed, which is basically about the organizational self. We'll call this core as the organizational self, and the Kshetra as various departments, finance, infrastructure, people, processes, etc. The organizational self, if you are if you understand the unique and the inspiring context of the organization, that is when you connect yourself with the organization. If you are an entrepreneur, then that idea or something with which you are going to create a business out of should be a unique and inspiring context for you as well as for the people who will come and work with you. So that Kshetra plus Kshetrajna should be actually identified. Unique and inspiring context is the self. And the Kshetra, the capacity to enable the Kshetra, finance, people, processes, and infrastructure in the organization. The organization is the Kshetra. And if you want to derive the joys of the self, results of fulfilling the organization in a sustainable manner, you need to maximize, optimize, and eliminate. So maximizing constructive styles, optimizing aggressive styles, and eliminating passive styles. These are the three things that you should do in the organization. The constructive styles are the sattva gunas, optimizing your aggressive styles, optimizing your rajoguna, and eliminating your passive styles, eliminating tamoguna is basically what is required. And with these three styles of constructive styles, aggressive styles, and the passive styles, your organizational culture can be developed. In fact, modern management concepts have come up with something called as organizational cultural inventory. There is one example here which I have just shown from Human Synergistics International. They have actually defined constructive styles, aggressive defensive styles, and passive defensive styles, and aggressive and aggressive and oppressive styles. Okay, so these three things are the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic contexts of a cultural kshetra, organizational kshetra. And if we can actually define and manipulate these constructive styles, aggressive styles, and passive styles, then we will be able to build very constructive organizations. Similarly, this is from enabling greatness in organizations. This constructive, aggressive, and passive styles are basically not only for organizations, of course, but of course we have been looking at in the Bhagavad-Gita from a personal point of view or from individuals, from within us, within our minds, how to build the constructive, aggressive, and passive styles and control it so that we become a constructive personality, a sattvic personality. In fact, if you look at this I will post. This constructive, aggressive, and passive styles is basically the very subject of the next chapter, 14th chapter, which is Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the three gunas. Constructive, aggressive, and passive gunas styles are basically discussed in the next chapter, which we'll be taking up next week. So with that, I think I will stop for today with the concluding prayer, and then we will have discussions if required.
पूर्णस्य